The Texas heat had a way of pressing down on a man, heavy and merciless, like the weight of memories he couldn't escape. Derek Malone sat alone on the porch of his modest rented house on the edge of town, a beer bottle sweating in his hand, staring at the horizon as dusk painted the sky a bruised purple. To the neighbors, he was just another man past his prime, a mechanic who never married, who never quite made it. But inside Derek lived a storm, one that had been building for 10 long years. He didn't need anyone to remind him of her name. Vanessa Price. Even the thought of it could make his jaw tighten until the muscles in his face ached. She wasn't just an old flame. She was the wound that never healed. Back in their 20s, they had been inseparable. Derek was the steady, quiet one with grease-stained hands and dreams of building a family. Vanessa was the firecracker, sharp, witty, the kind of woman who could light up a room with her laugh. He loved her with the kind of devotion a man gives only once. But love hadn't been enough. Their breakup had been cruel, humiliating, and public. He remembered it with sickening clarity. A Friday night at a house party, cheap beer and louder music. Words were exchanged, accusations flew, and then came the dagger. Vanessa's voice, sharp and mocking, cutting through the noise. "Derek, you call yourself a man? God help the woman who ever has to depend on you." The room erupted in laughter, his friends' faces flashing with pity and amusement. Derek felt his dignity collapse under the weight of her words. She didn't just leave him. She shattered him. 10 years had passed since that night, but time hadn't dulled the memory. It had only sharpened it. He still woke some mornings drenched in sweat, hearing her laughter in his ears. He had tried moving on, one short relationship after another, half-hearted attempts at love that all crumbled. His career as a mechanic paid the bills, but left him with nothing to be proud of. Nights alone with the television had become routine. And always, the ghost of Vanessa lingered. That evening, word came through the grapevine. A buddy from high school mentioned it casually at the gas station, like it was nothing at all. "Hey, did you hear? Vanessa's back in town. Moved into an apartment near Main Street. Looks like she's here to stay a while." The news hit Derek like a fist to the gut. For a moment, he stood frozen, the nozzle of the gas pump trembling in his hand. Then came the rush of heat to his face, the bile in his throat. Vanessa, here, after all these years. Back on his porch, Derek drained the last of his beer and set the bottle down hard, the clink echoing in the silence. He stared at the fading light, heart thudding in his chest. His mind raced with questions he didn't want to answer. What if he ran into her at the grocery store? What if she saw him and smirked, as if the past were just a joke to her? He pushed up from the chair and went inside. The mirror above the bathroom sink caught him, and for a long while he just stood there, studying the reflection. The lines etched deep around his eyes, the stubble peppered with gray, the weariness in his posture. He barely recognized the man staring back. His hands gripped the sink until his knuckles whitened. 10 years, he whispered. His voice cracked. 10 goddamn years, and I'm still the punchline. Images rushed back unbidden. The laughter, the sting of humiliation, the way his friends had looked at him that night as though he were less than a man. He slammed a fist against the counter, rattling the toothbrush holder. "No," he growled. "Not this time." There was a dangerous flicker in his eyes, the kind of flicker that belonged to a man who had nothing left to lose. Yet beneath the anger was something deeper, grief, loneliness, the ache of a life that had never measured up. Derek knew he couldn't run forever. The cicadas outside screamed into the night as Derek sank onto his worn couch, head in his hands. He thought about Vanessa's laugh, the way it once made him feel invincible. And then he thought about that same laugh, twisted into cruelty, how it had destroyed him. A tear slid down his cheek before he could stop it. He swiped it away, furious at his own weakness. The phone buzzed on the table beside him. A text from the same friend. "Couple of us meeting at Riley's bar tomorrow night. Heard Vanessa might show. You should come." Derek stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Every instinct screamed to delete the message, to stay away, to bury himself deeper in solitude. But another voice, darker and more insistent, whispered in his mind. This is your chance. After 10 years, face her. Show her you're not the man she mocked. Prove it. His chest rose and fell with a shaky breath. He typed one word back. Fine. As the Texas night settled heavy over the town, Derek lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The ghost of the past had returned, and whether he was ready or not, a reckoning was coming. Friday night in small-town Texas had its rituals, and Riley's bar was one of them. A dim-lit place with sticky floors, neon beer signs buzzing above the counter, and the constant hum of laughter, gossip, and country music playing too loud from the jukebox. For years, Derek had avoided it. Too many familiar faces. Too many reminders of who he used to be. But tonight, he walked through those doors, shoulders squared, jaw tight. The air smelled of whiskey and fried food. A few heads turned when he entered. Faces he recognized from high school. Older now, softer around the edges, but still carrying that knowing look. Derek gave them nothing. He went straight to the bar and ordered a beer. He sat alone, bottle in hand, trying to steady the pounding in his chest. His palms were clammy, his throat dry. He told himself he could just drink quietly, make small talk with old acquaintances, then leave. No drama, no ghosts. But ghosts have a way of finding you. Laughter rippled near the door, a sound that turned Derek's blood cold. He didn't have to look. He knew it. Vanessa Price had arrived. She walked in with that same effortless confidence she carried 10 years ago, though life had carved sharper edges into her beauty. Her hair was styled, her makeup perfect, her smile bright enough to draw eyes across the room. People greeted her, hugged her, as if she'd never left. She fit right back in. And then her eyes met Derek's. For a moment, time stalled. He thought maybe, just maybe, there would be a flicker of remorse, a softening, some acknowledgement of the wound she had carved into him years ago. But Vanessa only smirked, like she had spotted a curiosity. She leaned close to a friend, whispered something, and laughed. Derek's jaw clenched so tight it ached. He looked away, fixing his gaze on the condensation sliding down his bottle. It might have ended there, but Vanessa didn't let it. She drifted across the room, graceful as ever, until she was standing right beside him. Well, she said, her voice smooth as silk, but sharp as broken glass. If it isn't Derek Malone. Long time, huh? He nodded stiffly. Yeah, long time. Her smile widened. Guess some things never change. You still drinking the cheap stuff? Still sitting by yourself? Makes me nostalgic. The sting landed hard. He forced a swallow of beer, trying to keep calm. How have you been, Vanessa? Oh, you know, she shrugged, casual but cruel. Been through a lot. Lived a little, loved a little. Divorced now, but I'm surviving. Unlike some folks who seem stuck. Her eyes flicked over him, sizing him up. Derek's fingers tightened around the bottle. Good for you. But Vanessa wasn't finished. She leaned on the bar, voice loud enough for others nearby to hear. Do you remember that party? God, I'll never forget it. Poor Derek, standing there like a lost puppy. You should have seen your face when I told everyone. Stop. His voice was low, warning. She ignored it. When I told everyone you weren't much of a man at all. Laughter burst from the people around them. Friends who remembered, others who were just catching the joke for the first time. The sound sliced through Derek like a knife. He felt the room close in. The air thickened, the heat suffocating. His ears rang with humiliation, with rage, with the echo of that laughter that had haunted him for a decade. He could feel every eye on him, waiting to see what he would do. Vanessa smirked, raising her glass. Cheers to old times, Derek. Some things never change. The bottle in his hand nearly shattered under his grip. His heart pounded so violently he thought it might burst. He wanted to scream, to shove the words back down her throat, to make her understand the damage she had done. But the words stuck in his chest, tangled in anger and shame. He stood abruptly, the stool scraping against the floor. Heads turned, conversations paused. Derek's eyes locked on Vanessa's, blazing with fury. "Laugh while you can," he said through gritted teeth. "Laugh as loud as you want. But you won't laugh at me again." The bar went quiet for a heartbeat. Vanessa's smirk faltered, just slightly. Then she chuckled, dismissive, and turned back to her friends as if he were nothing more than a ghost wandering through her night. Derek stormed out, the door slamming behind him. Outside, the Texas night wrapped around him like a suffocating blanket. His chest heaved with every breath. He could still hear the laughter inside, muffled through the walls, echoing in his skull. He walked to his truck, fists clenched, body trembling. He sat behind the wheel, staring at the steering column, fighting for control. But the humiliation burned hotter than ever. In that moment, something shifted inside Derek Malone. The wound that had festered for 10 years ripped open, bleeding fresh rage. Vanessa had given him no mercy, no forgiveness, no recognition of his pain, only more mockery. And as he gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, a dark thought whispered through his mind. This ends tonight. Vanessa Price wasn't simply the sharp-tongued woman who walked into Riley's bar and lit the fuse. Beneath the polished hair and confident smile was a life that had not gone the way she once dreamed. After her divorce 2 years earlier, she had drifted from city to city, stringing together temp jobs and searching for stability. Moving back to her hometown wasn't triumph, it was retreat. She hated admitting it, but the place she once swore she'd outgrow was the only ground left to stand on. She told herself the teasing at the bar was harmless, a way to hide her own insecurities. Yet deep down, Vanessa carried her own shame. Failed relationships, missed chances, a loneliness she covered with laughter that often cut too deep. The truck's engine roared to life, but Derek didn't shift into gear. He sat in the driver's seat, chest heaving, his fingers digging into the steering wheel as though it might splinter under his grip. His reflection stared back faintly from the windshield, a face flushed, veins bulging at the temples, eyes wild. The laughter still echoed in his skull. That shrill, mocking sound, a decade old and still alive, now doubled with fresh venom from tonight. Vanessa's smirk, the crowd's chuckles, the pity in their eyes. It was a chorus that refused to die. He slammed his fist against the dashboard. The horn blared, startling a couple walking past on the sidewalk. They glanced at him, whispering, but Derek barely noticed. His chest burned with shame so deep it felt like fire in his lungs. How many more years am I supposed to live like this? He thought. How long do I let her laugh, let her poison who I am? The anger churned, but beneath it was something far more dangerous, despair. Derek had lived with the shadow of that one night for so long that it became the cornerstone of who he was. And now, faced with Vanessa's return, it felt as if she'd ripped open the wound just to watch him bleed. He drove, not toward home, not toward anywhere specific, just out into the Texas night, headlights cutting through the dark country roads. Fields stretched on both sides, endless and silent, but inside the cab it was chaos. The steering wheel creaked under his grip. His thoughts spun. He imagined walking back into that bar, grabbing Vanessa by the shoulders, screaming into her face until she finally understood the damage she'd done. He imagined the gasps, the silence, the end of the laughter. But a voice in his head whispered, "Words won't be enough." They never were. Rain began to fall, fat droplets splattering against the windshield, smearing the glow of the headlights into streaks of white. The wipers scraped back and forth, a metronome to his rage. Derek pulled onto a dirt road and parked beneath the twisted arms of an oak tree. He killed the engine, but the storm inside him only grew louder. His breath came in ragged bursts. He reached into the glove box and pulled out a small flask, unscrewed it, and swallowed hard. The burn of whiskey down his throat did nothing to cool the fire. On the passenger seat sat a photograph, one he kept tucked away for years, a picture of him and Vanessa in their younger days. Her smile was wide, her arm draped around him. Back then, she made him feel like he could take on the world. He stared at it now, trembling. Then his hand curled, and the picture tore in half with a sharp rip. He shredded it again and again, until nothing remained but scraps on the seat. Enough, he muttered, voice low, trembling with fury. I'm done being her joke. His gaze drifted to the glove compartment again, to the object hidden deeper inside, his father's old revolver. He hadn't touched it in years. It was more of a keepsake than a weapon, a relic from the man who had once tried to teach him strength. Now, it felt like destiny waiting in the dark. He pulled it out slowly, the cold steel heavy in his hand. The weight was grounding, terrifying, and intoxicating all at once. He stared at it under the dim glow of the cabin light, rain hammering the roof above. Memories collided, his father's voice telling him to stand tall, Vanessa's voice cutting him down, the jeers of friends, the smirk on her face tonight. The shame twisted into rage, so deep it was almost a relief. He pressed the gun against the side of the seat, his finger brushing the trigger. His chest rose and fell in shuddering waves. This ends tonight, he whispered. She won't laugh again. The rain intensified, drumming harder, as if the sky itself was warning him. But Derek's mind had crossed a threshold. The rational part of him, the part that knew prison, consequences, ruin, was drowned out by the roar of humiliation echoing for 10 long years. He started the truck again, engine growling in the storm. His headlights carved a path back toward town. Every mile closed the distance between him and Vanessa, between his broken past and the dark resolution he clung to now. As he drove, his reflection in the windshield seemed almost like a stranger, eyes hollow, jaw set, a man already consumed by what he intended to do. He gripped the revolver in one hand, steering with the other, the thought pounding through his skull in rhythm with the wipers. No more laughter. No more shame. No more Derek the joke. And with every turn of the wheels, he drew closer to the point of no return. The rain had thinned to a drizzle by the time Derek's truck rolled back into town. Midnight hung heavy over Main Street, the shops long closed, the sidewalks empty, the streetlights casting halos in the mist. His headlights swept across rows of brick buildings before stopping at a small apartment complex tucked between a laundromat and a liquor store. Vanessa's place. Derek killed the engine and sat in silence. His breath fogged the glass as he stared at the stairwell leading up to the second floor. Light glowed faintly through one of the windows. She was home. He gripped the revolver tighter, the steel biting into his palm. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might rattle the truck apart. For a moment, doubt gnawed at him. He could turn the key, drive away, let the night fade into memory. He could go home, bury the gun back in the glove box, drink until sleep dragged him under. But then he heard it again, Vanessa's voice, mocking, cruel, seared into his brain like acid. Do you remember that party? Poor Derek, not much of a man at all. His knuckles whitened around the grip. No more. The rain-soaked pavement splashed under his boots as he crossed the lot. The stairwell creaked as he climbed, every sound amplified in the silence. His hand shook as he raised it, but he forced himself to knock. A pause, then footsteps. The door opened, and there she was, Vanessa, still in the clothes from earlier, makeup smudged slightly, a glass of wine in her hand. Her eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed. Derek? She asked, incredulous. What the hell are you doing here? He didn't answer. His chest rose and fell, breath ragged. She scoffed, rolling her eyes. You've got some nerve showing up at my door after that little scene at Riley's. What? You come here looking for an apology. Don't hold your breath. He stepped inside before she could shut the door. Vanessa stumbled back, startled. Hey, what the? The revolver came up. Her wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. She froze, eyes wide with terror, all the bravado draining from her face. Derek, oh my God, what are you doing? His voice shook, low but deadly. I told you. You won't laugh at me again. Wait, she pleaded, hands raised. I was drunk, okay? I didn't mean it. It was years ago. Years? His voice cracked, rage spilling over. 10 years, Vanessa. 10 years of hearing that laugh in my head every damn day. You ruined me. You made me nothing. Tears welled in her eyes. Please, Derek. I didn't know. The gun fired. The sound was deafening in the small apartment, echoing off the walls. Vanessa collapsed against the couch, her body crumpling to the floor, eyes wide in shock, blood pooling around her. The silence that followed was suffocating. Derek stood motionless, the revolver trembling in his hand, smoke curling from the barrel. His breath came in gasps, his heart hammering. He stared at her body, at the stillness settling over her, at the stains spreading across the carpet. The storm inside him quieted, replaced by a hollow ringing in his ears. He thought he would feel powerful, vindicated. Instead, he felt empty, gutted, like the laughter had only grown louder in the silence. He dropped the revolver, the clang against the floor startling in the stillness. His knees buckled, and he sank beside her, staring at what he had done. You're quiet now, he whispered, his voice breaking. But I still hear you. A neighbor's dog barked outside. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed faintly, a cruel reminder that time was running out. Derek staggered to his feet, panic rising. He stumbled out of the apartment, down the stairs, and into the rain, disappearing into the night. The discovery came the next morning. A neighbor, an older woman who lived across the hall, had noticed Vanessa's door ajar and her light still on. Concerned, she knocked. When no one answered, she pushed the door open. The scream that tore from her throat rattled the walls. Police flooded the scene within minutes. Yellow tape stretched across the hallway. Officers moved through the apartment, flashlights sweeping over the shattered wine glass, the bloodied carpet, the revolver lying abandoned on the floor. The air reeked of iron and silence. Detective Luis Ramirez, a seasoned officer with weary eyes, crouched beside Vanessa's body. He shook his head slowly. Execution style, he murmured. Someone wanted her gone, and they wanted it personal. Detective Luis Ramirez carried ghosts of his own. 25 years on the force had hardened him, but there was one case that never left him. A young man who took his life after relentless bullying in high school. Ramirez had been the one to deliver the news to the boy's mother, her sobs burning into his memory. When he stepped into Vanessa's apartment and saw the body sprawled by the couch, a revolver on the floor, he felt that same familiar ache. Words had led to blood again. As he pieced the case together, Ramirez couldn't help but see both sides. He despised what Derek had done, but in the quiet moments he also recognized the hunger for dignity in the man's eyes. It wasn't sympathy, just the heavy knowledge that broken pride could be as dangerous as any weapon. Another officer approached, holding up a torn photograph found on the coffee table, pieces of Vanessa and Derek smiling in younger days. Sir, you're going to want to see this. Ramirez studied it, his jaw tightening. Find Malone, he ordered. Now. Word spread quickly through the town. Vanessa Price, once the Golden Girl, found murdered in her own apartment. The news hit like wildfire, whispered at diners, gas stations, churches. Some mourned, some gossiped, but all pointed fingers. And Derek Malone's name was on every tongue. That night, Derek sat in his darkened house, blinds drawn, the television flickering but ignored. He hadn't eaten. He hadn't slept. His hands shook as he replayed it all. The knock, her face, the shot. He couldn't scrub the image from his mind. The town buzzed outside, the police closing in. Inside, Derek was already a prisoner of his own making, shackled to the silence of a woman he could never outrun. And though her voice was gone, her laughter still echoed in his head, louder than ever. By dawn, the news of Vanessa Price's murder had spread like wildfire through the town. People whispered in diners, church parking lots, and hardware stores. Vanessa, the girl who had once been everyone's favorite, was gone, violently ripped from life. And almost immediately, another name surfaced with equal speed: Derek Malone. Detective Luis Ramirez had seen it before. In small towns, everyone thought they knew the story before the evidence told it. Still, the evidence came fast, and it all pointed the same way. The revolver left at the scene was old, but registered to Derek's late father. The torn photograph found on Vanessa's coffee table, half her smile, half his, spoke louder than any witness. Then came the neighbor's account of seeing a tall, broad man in a dark jacket leaving the apartment around midnight. Finally, there was the camera at the liquor store across the street. A blurry image, but the truck in the lot matched Derek's. By mid-morning, 2 squad cars rolled up to Derek's house. Inside, he was slumped on the couch, the television flickering static, empty beer cans littering the coffee table. He hadn't changed clothes from the night before. His eyes were hollow, ringed dark, his face pale with exhaustion and dread. The pounding on the door rattled him. "Police, open up." For a moment, Derek thought of running. But there was nowhere to go. Slowly, heavily, he pulled himself up and opened the door. Detective Ramirez stood there, raincoat damp, eyes hard but steady. "Derek Malone?" "Yes," Derek croaked. "You're coming with us." At the station, the interrogation room was as cold and sterile as a morgue. A metal table, 2 chairs, and a buzzing fluorescent light overhead that made Derek squint. He sat hunched, hands clasped tight, trying not to shake. Across from him, Ramirez flipped through a folder thick with photographs and reports. He slid one across the table. Vanessa's lifeless body, her eyes wide, blood pooling beneath her. Derek flinched. Don't put that in front of me." Ramirez leaned back, folding his arms. "Then tell me why you were there." "I wasn't," Derek muttered, staring at the table. Ramirez's brow arched. "You weren't?" "Because your neighbor saw your truck outside. The liquor store camera saw your truck outside. And that revolver, your father's revolver, was found lying next to her body. You want to try again?" Derek's throat worked as he swallowed. He rubbed his face with both hands, his voice breaking. "She ruined me. She made me a joke. 10 years, detective. 10 years I've lived with it. I didn't go there to kill her. I just wanted her to understand." Ramirez's voice hardened. "Understand what, Derek? That you'd point a loaded gun at her? That you'd shoot her in her own home?" "I didn't mean," his voice cracked, tears springing to his eyes. "I just snapped. She wouldn't stop. She wouldn't stop laughing at me." Ramirez studied him, silent for a long moment. He'd seen killers who denied until the bitter end, and he'd seen those who broke down under the weight of guilt. Derek was somewhere in between, both a man destroyed and a man dangerous. "You want me to believe this was an accident?" Ramirez finally asked. Derek's shoulders slumped, his voice barely audible. "I don't even know what it was anymore." Outside the room, officers pieced the puzzle together. They gathered witness statements from Riley's bar, where patrons recalled Vanessa humiliating Derek in front of everyone. They logged text messages from Derek's phone, angry words sent to Vanessa that very night. One, in particular, was damning. "Laugh now, but tonight it ends." It painted a picture no jury would ignore. Back in the room, Ramirez pushed the folder shut. He sighed, leaning forward, his tone less harsh now, almost weary. "You know what the jury's going to see, Derek? A man humiliated, drinking, stewing, and finally snapping. You drove across town with your father's gun. That's premeditation, whether you admit it or not." Derek's head fell into his hands. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. "I just wanted it to stop," he whispered. The laughter, it never stopped. Ramirez watched him for a long moment. There was no satisfaction in it. Just another ruined life, another tragedy written in blood. He stood, signaling to the officer by the door. "Book him. Charges murder in the 1st degree." Word spread quickly again, this time with confirmation. Derek Malone was under arrest for the murder of Vanessa Price. Some folks shook their heads, saying they always knew he was unstable. Others muttered about how Vanessa had pushed him too far. But no one could deny the grim reality. 2 lives destroyed, one by a bullet, the other by his own hand. Back in his holding cell, Derek lay on the narrow cot, staring at the ceiling through swollen eyes. The echo of Vanessa's laughter still haunted him, but now it mingled with the sound of the gunshot, looping endlessly in his mind. There was no escape anymore. The noose had tightened, and Derek knew he would never walk free again, not in body, not in spirit. In the days after Vanessa's death, the town of Denton moved under a heavy cloud. At the diner on Main Street, people lowered their voices, leaning across sticky booths to whisper about what had happened. Some said Derek had always been odd, always simmering under the surface. Others shook their heads at Vanessa's sharp tongue, saying she never knew when to stop. Every opinion was colored by years of small-town memory. High school games, Sunday services, gossip carried down grocery aisles. Even the pastor at First Baptist brought it up in his sermon. Words, he said, his voice echoing through the pews, can build a man up, or they can tear him down to nothing. And once spoken, they cannot be taken back. Congregants nodded solemnly, some glancing sideways, as if guilt lingered on all of them for laughing at Derek back then. When Vanessa's funeral came, the little church overflowed. The pews filled with classmates, neighbors, old flames, co-workers. Her sister wept openly at the podium, recalling the Vanessa who once sang in the choir, who stayed up late braiding her hair, who dreamed of traveling but never quite left home for good. But there were also sideways glances, quiet admissions that Vanessa had been complicated. She could be cruel, someone whispered in the hallway, but she could also light up a room. The casket, draped in white lilies, was lowered under the wide Texas sky. The breeze carried the smell of wildflowers and dust, a reminder that life in Denton County never slowed, not even for grief. As the dirt thudded softly on the casket, silence fell, a silence heavy with judgment, regret, and the knowledge that words had helped dig the grave as surely as the bullet. For Derek, locked away miles from the cemetery, there would be no closure. But for the town, Vanessa's laughter and his rage became cautionary tales woven into its history, the kind parents would murmur to their children when warning them about pride, cruelty, and the dangers of letting bitterness fester. The courthouse in Denton County buzzed with anticipation the morning Derek Malone's trial began. Reporters swarmed the steps, their cameras flashing, microphones shoved at anyone who might offer a quote. Locals crowded the benches inside, eager for the spectacle, justice, tragedy, gossip, all rolled into one. Derek shuffled into the courtroom in shackles, wearing a wrinkled shirt and slacks provided by the jail. His hair had grown unkempt, his face pale and hollow. He kept his eyes on the floor, avoiding the stares, the whispers, the cameras that lingered on his every move. At the prosecution's table, Assistant District Attorney Claire Holt sat poised and stern, her dark suit sharp, her eyes sharper. She had a reputation for being relentless, and today she intended to make Derek the symbol of unchecked rage and violence. On the defense side, Public Defender Jason Merrick leaned close to Derek, whispering urgently. Merrick was younger, less polished, but determined to humanize his client. His strategy was clear: paint Derek not as a monster, but as a broken man pushed too far. Judge William Carter, a tall man with silver hair and a reputation for no-nonsense order, banged the gavel. Court is now in session. People of Texas versus Derek Malone. The opening statements set the tone. Claire Holt rose first, her heels clicking on the polished wood floor. She faced the jury, her voice steady, commanding. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is not complicated. The defendant, Derek Malone, carried a revolver to Vanessa Price's apartment. He entered her home. He pointed that weapon at her, and he pulled the trigger. This was not an accident. This was not self-defense. This was murder, born of humiliation and rage. You will see the evidence, the gun registered to him, the text messages threatening her, the witnesses who heard her mocking him that very night. This is premeditation, and it demands justice. The jury sat in rapt silence, some nodding slightly as she spoke. When she finished, Jason Merrick stood. His voice lacked Holt's razor edge, but carried an earnest, almost pleading tone. Ladies and gentlemen, you will hear about the words Vanessa Price spoke to my client. Not once, not twice, but over the course of years. Words that cut him down to nothing, that haunted him every day of his life. Derek Malone is not a cold-blooded killer. He is a man who broke under the weight of humiliation he could no longer bear. Was it right? No, but it was human. And I ask you, when you weigh the facts, to see the man, not just the moment. Derek glanced at the jury, his eyes wet, his face etched with exhaustion. For a flicker of a second, one or two jurors seemed to soften. The prosecution began with the forensic evidence. A crime scene investigator described the revolver found by Vanessa's body. Photographs of the torn photograph, the shattered wine glass, and the blood-stained carpet were projected on a screen. The room grew heavy as the images passed. Next came the testimony of the neighbor who had heard the gunshot, who had seen a figure leaving the apartment. It was dark, she admitted, but he had Derek's build. Broad shoulders. And the truck in the lot? I'd seen that truck around for years. Claire Holt hammered the point home. And that truck belonged to the defendant, correct? Yes, ma'am. Then came the damning texts. One officer read them aloud, each word like a nail in a coffin. Laugh now, but tonight it ends. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Derek stared at his lap, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The defense fought back. Merrick called patrons from Riley's bar to testify about Vanessa's cruelty that night. One man, shifting uncomfortably on the stand, admitted, yeah, she laid into him pretty hard. Brought up old stuff, real personal. Folks laughed. I felt bad for the guy. Merrick leaned in. Would you say Derek looked humiliated? Crushed, the man said. Like someone stomped on him in front of the whole room. Another witness, a former co-worker, spoke of Derek's quiet, gentle nature. He wasn't violent. Not ever. Just carried a lot of hurt. Merrick's argument became clear. Vanessa had lit the fuse that night, and Derek exploded. Not premeditation, provocation. The climax came when Derek himself took the stand. His lawyer warned him against it, but Derek insisted. He wanted them to hear his voice. He sat stiffly, hands clasped, voice trembling as he addressed the jury. She never knew what she did to me. Or maybe she did, and she just didn't care. That night at the bar, when she laughed again, it was like 10 years of pain hit me all at once. I didn't go there planning to kill her. I swear I didn't. I just wanted her to stop, to understand that her words weren't just jokes. They destroyed me. His voice cracked, and tears slid down his face. And when she looked at me in that apartment, all I saw was every laugh, every smirk, every time she made me feel less than a man. I lost control. I'll regret it until the day I die. Silence blanketed the room. Even Judge Carter shifted uncomfortably. But Holt wasted no time. She rose, crossing to stand inches from Derek. Mr. Malone, you didn't just happen to be there. You drove to her home with a revolver. You carried that revolver inside. You pointed it at her. Those are choices. Choices, not accidents. Isn't that right? Derek's lips trembled. He whispered, yes. The word echoed in the room like a verdict already sealed. By the time closing arguments arrived, the jury had heard everything. Every tear, every piece of evidence, every word of rage. Claire Holt thundered. Humiliation is not an excuse for murder. If it were, our society would collapse. Derek Malone chose violence, and Vanessa Price paid with her life. Merrick, voice raw with desperation, countered. He is guilty of breaking, yes. But guilty of murder in the first degree? Of planning it? No. He is guilty of being human, of losing control. Find him guilty of manslaughter if you must, but don't call him a monster. The jury filed out, leaving the town, the families, and Derek to wait in a silence heavy enough to choke. The jury was out less than 4 hours. When the bailiff's voice rang through the courtroom announcing their return, the air thickened with anticipation. Every bench was filled, the silence so sharp it cut. Derek sat at the defense table, trembling, his hands clasped so tight his knuckles gleamed white. The foreman, a gray-haired man in a denim jacket, stood as Judge Carter asked for the decision. His voice was steady, unshaken. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Derek Malone, guilty of murder in the first degree." The words hit Derek like a physical blow. His breath caught, his vision blurred, and the world seemed to tilt. Somewhere behind him, a woman gasped. On the prosecution's side, Vanessa's sister buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking with grief and relief. Jason Merrick leaned toward Derek, whispering, "I'm sorry. I did all I could." But the words were swallowed by the roar of blood in Derek's ears. Judge Carter banged the gavel for order. "Sentencing will proceed immediately. Given the nature of this crime and the overwhelming evidence presented, the court sentences Derek Malone to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." The words landed heavy, final, immovable. Life. No parole. Derek's chest heaved as if he were drowning. He shook his head slowly, whispering under his breath, No, I didn't mean." His voice cracked, tears spilling freely down his face. For the first time in years, his humiliation was gone, replaced by something worse, utter emptiness. The bailiff moved to cuff him. As the cold steel clicked around his wrists, Derek lifted his eyes, glassy and red, to the ceiling lights. "She's still laughing," he murmured. The courtroom shifted uneasily at the words, some jurors averting their eyes, others staring in silent judgment. He was led past the gallery, shuffling in chains. Some looked at him with disgust, others with pity, but none with forgiveness. At the front row, Vanessa's sister raised her head. Her eyes locked with Derek's, eyes full of rage, sorrow, and a kind of finality that pierced him deeper than the sentence itself. Out on the courthouse steps, reporters shouted questions, but inside, the last image lingered. Derek Malone, shoulders slumped, swallowed by chains, whispering into the void as if the ghost of Vanessa still lingered in his ear. And in his mind, the verdict never ended. It replayed, just like her laughter. Guilty. Life. No escape. The trial ended, but the ripples of the tragedy spread far beyond the courthouse walls. In town, people spoke of it in hushed voices at the diner over morning coffee, at the gas station, while filling up, outside the church on Sunday. Everyone had an opinion, and everyone carried a piece of the story with them. Some shook their heads at Derek, calling him weak, saying he'd let his pride destroy 2 lives. Others muttered that Vanessa had gone too far, that her cruel words had stoked a fire that never should have been lit. But beneath all the gossip was a sobering truth. Nothing could bring Vanessa back, and nothing could free Derek from the prison he had built long before steel bars locked him in. Vanessa's funeral drew a crowd. She was laid to rest under a wide Texas sky, the scent of wildflowers carried on the wind. Friends and family wept openly, remembering the vibrant young woman she once was, glossing over the sharper edges of her personality. In death, as in life, she commanded attention. Her laughter was gone, but its echo lingered in the minds of everyone who had ever heard it. Meanwhile, Derek was transferred to Huntsville Prison, a gray monolith of stone and steel miles away from the town he once called home. Inside, the days blurred together, roll calls, meager meals, the clank of doors closing. The noise of prison life surrounded him, yet he lived in silence. Each night, lying on the narrow cot, he stared at the ceiling until the shadows twisted into memories. He replayed the bar, the smirk on her face, the wine glass shattering, the gunshot ringing in his ears. Sometimes he whispered to the darkness, confessing to no one in particular. I thought it would end the laughter, but it never did. Other inmates avoided him, sensing the weight he carried. Guards treated him like any other convict, but a few saw the hollow look in his eyes, the way he drifted through each day like a ghost already halfway gone. Back in town, Vanessa's story became a cautionary tale. Parents told their children that words can cut deeper than knives. Preachers spoke of pride and forgiveness, of the danger of letting bitterness fester. But for most, it was just another tragedy stamped into the soil of Texas, destined to fade into whispers as years went by. For Derek, there was no fading, only the endless loop. Her laughter, his rage, the verdict, the cell door closing. On one particularly quiet night, a guard passing his cell paused. Derek was sitting on the cot, staring into the dark, his lips moving. The guard leaned closer, hearing him whisper the same words over and over, like a prayer or a curse. She's still laughing. She's still laughing. And in that prison cell, under the hum of fluorescent lights, the ghost of Vanessa Price lived on, not in flesh, not in voice, but in the echo that Derek Malone would never escape. Months after the verdict, the town of Denton still carried the weight of what had happened. The case had been dissected on local talk radio, in newspaper editorials, even in classrooms where teachers used it as a warning. But the deeper wound wasn't about a man who pulled the trigger. It was about how words had paved the road to blood. At a community meeting, the pastor who had spoken at Vanessa's funeral returned to the theme. "We live in a world," he said, "where we think words are just air, passing through lips and gone. But in truth, they can lodge like bullets. They can echo in the mind for years, carving wounds deeper than anyone can see." Parents nodded, some clutching the hands of their children. One mother whispered to her teenage son, "Don't laugh at people like that. Don't ever make someone the butt of your joke." The tragedy had become a parable of sorts, one about pride, cruelty, and silence. Even the sheriff spoke candidly at a town hall. This wasn't just Derek Malone's crime. It was all of ours, in some small way. We laughed when he was broken. We looked away when he carried that shame. And by the time he snapped, it was too late. In prison, Derek never heard these words. He remained locked in his loop, whispering about Vanessa's laughter to the dark. But outside those walls, Denton tried, in its own imperfect way, to learn. For Vanessa, the story ended in a grave too soon. For Derek, it ended in chains. But for everyone else, it remained a reminder that words are never weightless, and silence can be as deadly as bullets. And so, under the wide Texas sky, the town carried forward, changed, chastened, but never forgetting that sometimes the most dangerous weapons aren't guns at all. They're words that echo long after they're spoken.